You are not special. You're not. Nobody is. So you are not special. It opens up with a story of a guy I knew named Jimmy. Jimmy is actually, he's a kind of a composite of two different people I knew, but Jimmy is basically, he's a con man, essentially. Like pathological liar, schemer, bullshit artist, 24/7 salesman. I knew him for about a year in my mid-20s, back when I was starting my first business, and he was starting a number of businesses too. And the dude, he was just a grifter, total lowlife, wasted money left, right, and center. And so I tell this story about Jimmy, and I use him as an example for a concept I introduced of entitlement. I define entitlement in the book as feeling as though you deserve to be happy without sacrificing for it. It's basically that idea of believing you deserve to have positive experiences without traversing the negative experiences to get there. I spent much of this chapter pointing out, both from stories about Jimmy, but also stories of me being a dickhead in my own life, that it's this belief that we shouldn't have to go through the negative and only have the positive that causes us to adopt many destructive and selfish behaviors. So here you go. There are two forms of entitlement. Form number one is, I'm awesome and the rest of you all suck, therefore I deserve to have special treatment. Form number two is, I suck and the rest of you are awesome, so I deserve special treatment. So in the psychological research, this is known as grandiose narcissism versus victim narcissism. And it's basically, they seem to be opposites on the surface. Like one person thinks he's better than everybody and then the other person thinks he's worse than everybody. But the behavior ends up being the same because both people have delusional beliefs about their place in the status hierarchy. One person thinks he's at the top, one person thinks he's at the bottom. But the behavior ends up being the same. They end up being completely self-absorbed. They think everything in the world should be altered and catered to them. And yeah, they just become unbearable to be around. The growing culture of exceptionalism, particularly with social media, consumer culture, things like that, they're always pushing us individually. Like if you think of beer commercials or like, you know, the way Facebook algorithms are designed, like everything is designed to make you feel like you're the most special fucking person on the planet. And my argument is that that is actually mentally and socially unhealthy, because that drives an attitude and a feeling of entitlement. It creates delusional beliefs that you are somehow the exception, that the world owes you something, that everything should be rearranged to cater to your desires and your happiness, that you should be able to have positive experiences without accepting the negative. I close out the chapter by using a metaphor that I really like. I'll just read a couple paragraphs. All of this, quote, every person can be extraordinary and achieve greatness stuff is basically just jerking off your ego. It's a message that tastes good going down, but in reality is nothing more than empty calories that make you emotionally fat and bloated. The proverbial Big Mac for your heart and your brain. The ticket to emotional health, like that to physical health, comes from eating your veggies. That is, accepting the bland and mundane truths of life. Truths such as your actions actually don't matter that much in the grand scheme of things, and the vast majority of your life will be boring and not noteworthy, and that's okay. This vegetable course will taste bad at first, very bad. But once ingested, your body will wake up feeling more potent and alive.
What I took away from that, and again, relating it to investing, is like my portfolio is not special. The billionaires, they don't care about my money. The hedge fund guys, they don't care about my money. I care about my money. I have to be responsible for what I do with my cash. It's not special. It could go up, it could go down. No one's going to care. You mentioned something when we were talking. I forgot what it was. It's that principle of when you're losing money on a stock, you get this feeling like the stock owes it to you. Now you got to hold it because you have to get the gains back in that stock. And I think we gave an example of when we sold out of some positions early in the year of 2021 and redirected that money at a loss into Tesla. And yeah, I think it was Palantir. Yeah, we talked about Palantir. Yeah. Talk about Palantir. The idea that if you lost, say, 60% of your money in Palantir, that you just refuse to sell that stock because that stock suddenly needs to give you those gains back is a fallacy that's going to make you poor.
Sunk cost fallacy. So once you buy something, you think that thing has to make you whole.
Yes.
Well, money doesn't care how it works. So if you put it somewhere else and it makes you whole, what do you care? So people get all crazy about it. Like, for example, if I lost faith in Tesla, if I thought Elon was off the rails and he was really just leaving Tesla and it was going to tank, I would have no problem selling out of Tesla. I don't think that's happening. That's why I'm not. He is a crazy fuck. Don't get me wrong. And I can say that now in this podcast.
Well, we're shareholders. We can say whatever we want.
He is a crazy fuck. But the thing is, if I go back to when I first invested in Tesla, he was a crazy fuck back then.
Yes. Yes. It's not like he's doing this Twitter thing in 2018 when we need to ramp up the Model 3.
There are differences and we can get into specifics. But basically, if I invested in a crazy fuck 4 years ago, I'm investing in a crazy fuck now. The only thing that's changed is now this crazy fuck has more money. basically. So
Right. It's like the chick was crazy when you met her, right? So you can't
right,
complain when she
right.
does crazy things.
I
Yeah.
I mean, the way I decided to invest in Tesla was when he went and smoked on Joe Rogan, smoked up, and I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. The stock is tanking. So you have to be prepared for both, basically, to your point. But it's your whole portfolio to be prepared that everything can go down or nothing can go down, or everything can work out or nothing can work out, or it'll be some mixture of the two, probably, where some things work out, some things don't. And I think that's okay, but it's something I had to learn to accept. And I think our new member on our Patreon too, Ruch, I forgot her exact name.
Yeah.
Ruch,
The one from India?
Ruch is a new investor from the woman from India who's on our
Yeah.
Patreon. Thank you for supporting us. But basically, she's like, how long did it take you to learn to invest? And I'm like, I don't know, 10, maybe 20 years. And she's like, what? That long? I'm like, yeah, that's the way you invest. It takes a long time to actually make any money. We got lucky in 2020 that to 2022 that it was some circumstances that came together and the Fed went on a printing frenzy. So we got lucky in that respect.
But that wasn't lucky. That was what the system was designed to do. That's what that was designed to do, and we just decided to participate.
Well,
That's not luck. You know what I mean? Because the world was ending, bro. You know.
I get what you're saying, but we had to be there for a long time in order to participate. Like if I was day one investing, I probably wouldn't have bought Enphase and Tesla during those times. Like I wouldn't understand that those are quality companies I should buy. Basically, it took maybe 10 years to get to that point because in 2008, I didn't do that. I used Google and Amazon and I used Apple, but I didn't go heavy into them. Why not? What was the difference? The difference was I didn't have that education. 10 years later, I was looking for things like Tesla and Enphase. I was actually actively pursuing them.
I'm finding that investing is a lot like learning an instrument, where the more you learn, like you can get a lot of gains like early on in terms of the knowledge, but then you reach a certain point where you get so good at an instrument that you then realize how little you actually know. Like the instrument itself humbles you all the time. And I find that with investing, even with some of the successes I've had, I just look back at how much better I could have done. And I'm trying to set myself up for the future, knowing that it could be another 10 or 20 years till I can actually play that out. It's incredibly, incredibly humbling. The trick to emotional health, like that to physical health, comes from eating your veggies. That is accepting the bland and mundane truths about life. The eating your veggies is a metaphor for doing the dollar cost averaging, taking a certain percentage of your income every month, being diligent about it, and doing it because you know it's the right thing. It's the equivalent of eating your veggies, and you know that you're doing it for your overall financial health. It's like, even if you just go to the gym right now 30 minutes a day and move a bunch of weights around, even if your form is not the best, you're going to look better. Your body's going to respond. And it's this idea that if you just do that, if you just dollar cost average, or even take a small percentage, even if you just go into index funds, you're going, the numbers say you're going to be better off in 5, 10, 15 years than you would if you didn't do that. All right. The value of suffering, or also known as 2021.
Starting with chapter 4, the book becomes a lot more about values, and it becomes more about what are we willing to sacrifice for? So like, assuming you buy the arguments of the first 3 chapters that we should sacrifice for something, that we should struggle for something, that's what makes life more meaningful and generates a more consistent sense of happiness. The next question is, what is worth struggling for? What is worth valuing? What is worth sacrificing for? And there was a number of Japanese soldiers in World War II, like they got stranded on random islands in the Pacific, and nobody told them the war was over. So they continued to fight the war into the 1950s, 60s, and even 70s. And so the last soldier who was still fighting World War II, I think he finally surrendered in like 1973 or something like that. I'd have to look here. Anyway, his name was Hiro Nada, and I wrote his story here, and I used him as an example of how, like, it doesn't matter how disciplined you are, it doesn't matter how motivated you are, it doesn't matter how strong you are, how intelligent you are, how much support you have. If you have the wrong goal, you're fucked. If you have the wrong value, then all of that other stuff, it's just going to hurt you. And I use Onada as an example of that. He spent 27 years fighting a war that didn't exist, literally killing people. He was on an obscure island in the Philippines. He was still shooting at people, killing people, hiding in the jungle for 27 years. Obviously, he was doing an amazing job, but he was like Don Quixote. He was like chasing windmills, right? So if we agree that we should sacrifice, what is worth sacrificing for? Good values tend to be 1, reality-based, 2, socially constructive, and 3, immediate and controllable. Bad values tend to be 1, superstitious, 2, socially destructive, and 3, not immediate or controllable. Honesty is a good value because it's something you can have complete control over, it reflects reality, and it benefits others, even if it's sometimes unpleasant.
So what'd you think of that one? Choosing what to give a fuck about, not being the guy still fighting the war when the war is over.
That's actually important because we're just like right now, we're always distracted with the media trying to push a narrative. Mm-hmm. And it's up to you whether you just don't give a fuck about that narrative and you move on with what's reality. When I look at the reality, I look around, like I said, I look at Tesla and selling the EVs. I drive by hundreds of Teslas at this point, solar, with my rooftop solar, with people getting it, only 3% penetration, like the S curve we're on. I look at the reality of what's happening out there. And that's what he's saying. What are you going to give a fuck about? What the media is pitching into the narrative that all of this is failing and this is not working out, or you're going to look at the reality of things, what's actually happening. And so I tend to be actually very pragmatic and reality based. So he spoke right to me in that. I always look at what's actually happening, boots on the ground. Is this working out? Is this not? I'll give you an example counter to what's happening. Meta just lost John Carmack. He's the guy who was in charge of VR at Meta. And part of my bull case, because John Carmack is the guy who did Doom. I don't know if you remember, he did all of that stuff. All that greedy stuff. So he was what gave me sort of that little sleep at night, easy to sleep that John Carmack.
That he's on your money's with him. Yes.
John Carmack is, look, he's a smart dude. If I was to bet on anybody, it'd be also John Carmack, that he was there at Meta doing the right things and he just left. So that's actually like dinging me a lot, meaning like in my case
like
about Oculus,
hitting your thesis. Yeah, hits your thesis.
My case about Oculus was involving this guy because, like, look, we bet on leaders. I actually do believe Zuck is a great leader, but John Carmack is an amazing technologist, way better programmer and way better like technologist
than Mark.
He's not a better business guy, but he's just a better technologist. That's different. So that part is dinging me. Now I have to look at the reality of what is happening, even though Meta's and now look, now JPM is coming out and raising the price targets. Everyone's coming back on the Meta train. Actually, TikTok is being hammered. So
it's 70% down. It's starting to look attractive again. It's
starting to look attractive. So, and now John Carmack leaves, of course, and so that's sort of like now I have to process that because he was actually very important to my long-term thesis. I never invested in Meta for the social, the apps. Basically, I didn't invest for Facebook. I didn't invest I invested that the future is part of like VR, AR. I think that's a real future. Maybe it's 10 years away, maybe it's 5, probably 10, but that's what I was investing for. And now with him gone, I don't know. I got to think about it now.
That's the reason why you've been successful, is because you don't stick to the thesis and go down with the sinking ship and be the guy who's still fighting World War II 27 years after it's over. That's what those people do, right? You have a thesis, you've made your conclusion, and you ignore any of the news or incoming information that challenges that thesis because you don't want to admit being wrong.
Well, we did that with FUV a little bit because we ignored some of the warning signs. Like
but we were also in communication with the CEO at the time, right? So we were trying to take people at face value, and mainstream media giving you a certain narrative. They're feeding you information to make you think a certain way. And we were getting information from other places that caused us to believe that maybe he was right? Because if anyone would know, it would be him.
Yeah, I know, but we ignored obvious things like they didn't have enough money in the bank. They weren't raising in the proper channels. They weren't diluting us when they should have been diluted. So all these things we did, we've talked about it at length. I actually don't feel a lot of loss because most of my actual shares were removed 6 months ago, a year ago, and the calls are still there, worthless. That's true, but I still don't feel the same loss as if I did nothing and just stood by. The evidence was there. The evidence was there that it wasn't going to work out. We just ignored all the facts. The stock market is giving us different signals, but that is not the actual company.
That was the point that I was going to make. I took this particular point that he was making in the book to be more about companies, to be more about the companies than the particular investors. And you touched on this too. Good values, reality-based, socially constructive, immediately and controllable. Companies that are basing their business around this, reality-based, say someone like a Tesla or an Enphase, basing on the reality that we need to switch to sustainable energy, socially constructive. Those companies doing well actually has a net benefit for society, immediate and controllable. We actually do have the materials on Earth to make this happen. It's just a matter of the logistics. That to me is a sign that the company's foundation is strong.